All right, ladies and gentlemen, what's up? BC here, another episode. I got my homeboy here, Ivan, whatever. It's all good. That's a part of the show. So we brought him on. I actually met him through Bryan, my trainer in calisthenics, and he had a cool story. He came to the last event that we did here for the Miami Business Connection, which we're doing again tomorrow, Saturday, January 6th. And I wanted to come on and interview him because I think he has a cool and interesting story for everybody. So my friend, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Bryan. It's a pleasure to be here. Honestly, from the moment we met, I think everything that you had to say was very on point and very interesting to me. So being here is a pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you, bro. So a quick introduction. You know, everyone's looking at you like, who's this guy?
Absolutely. So my name is Ivan Alarcon, originally from Mexico, entrepreneur at heart. And just, a big focus on hospitality, telecommunications, also involved in some other businesses such as importation of goods from Mexico.
Cool.
And now really trying to dive into construction and real estate game as well. So it's exciting for sure.
Hell yeah, man. So born and raised in Mexico? Or?
Born and raised in Mexico, Monterrey, 100%. Órale, for sure. But obviously I identify with both cultures. Been in the United States for quite some time now, for sure.
So Monterrey, and then at what age did you move here and where did you go originally in the U.S.?
So my hometown in the United States, I would say, is Houston, Texas.
Cool.
So I actually moved when I was 6 years old for the first time.
Cool.
Did elementary in Houston, Texas. That's where I kind of learned all my bases. And then I actually went back to Mexico for middle school and high school. And at that moment, I was involved in sports, soccer. So I had to make decisions because I was trying to play the professional route, which was, it's a tough road, or come to the United States for college and kind of get that paid for through sports. So I came to the United States for college.
Cool. Where'd you go to college?
So I ended up going to Iowa for the first year and a half. Bit cold for my tasting, and I ended up here in South Florida at Nova Southeastern University. So graduated computer science many moons ago.
Cool. So is that how you ended up, finally like normalizing and staying in South Florida? Was that move from Iowa to the university in Florida?
So obviously, the soccer world's a very small world. So, a lot of people. And I had a good run in Iowa. And so I had some people that were down here in South Florida and said, hey, listen, why don't you come down here? There's opportunities. Yeah. Obviously, education was a big piece of it. So, Nova Southeastern was a great fit for me. And that's how I ended up in South Florida.
Cool. Yeah. Now, we were talking off camera. Did you end up playing professionally at all?
So I played professionally before college in third division.
Oh, wow.
So at 16, 17 years old.
Nice.
But, it is a tough road. So, and coming from a family where education was super important, it was like, all right, let's think about college education, still play sports. And, I heard that in the United States, they give scholarships for, playing ping pong. So might as well take advantage of it. So that's how I ended up doing that.
So did you grow up like with soccer as a passion of yours?
It's the number one passion that I have. Absolutely. Yeah. So, obviously that was transmitted to my children as well.
Cool.
But I literally could play. I played since I could walk.
Yeah.
And continue to do so every once in a while.
I love that, bro. I got to introduce you to my pops, right? You guys will get along. Yeah.
Oh, of course. Well, now I found out that you have an Argentinian background. You must be extremely happy right now.
Bro, my dad, I don't know if you ever saw that viral video of that old dude watching a game back in like 2010. So that, like, my dad's a little bit more calm than him. Okay. But when the game is on, bro, especially like when the Olympics are on, he fucking goes nuts. And I wish I could have recorded some of those moments, bro, because he would have been viral too, right? Because that dude is still famous to this day in Argentina because he just got famous yelling at the TV watching a game, and I'm like, man, that's the average person over there. And Argentina, who's passionate.
Argentina takes passion to another level.
Especially with the la groserías. It's crazy, man. So the cussing, if you guys aren't aware, is like, I think Argentina is probably number one in regards to the level of cussing. It's ridiculous, right? So cool, man. You do all that, right? So you played pro a little bit before. So after college, like when you graduate, was there like, do I want to pursue soccer? Like what happened immediately after that?
Well, there was that opportunity. Obviously, that was the number one goal. But, there was also personal decisions that came along. So by 22, I was a father. So, of course, I had to take responsibility in that. And so I said, I have my education. Let's focus on that. So I went into the corporate world. So I was in telecommunications for about a decade. And it was a tough time. It was a tough time in the 2000s. I graduated 2001. And and it was tough because telecom was on the downside, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And even though I was able to climb the corporate ladder, it was still a corporate ladder. And I think the turning moment for me, I got to a point where I had people working for me, et cetera, but layoffs were just every day. And when I started at my company, it was about 100,000 employees worldwide.
Wow.
When I left a decade later, it was down to 17,000.
Wow.
So as you can imagine, the environment wasn't the best. But the key point for me to realize that I needed to do something else for myself was when I had to sit down and had to deliver a package to somebody that had been there for about 25 years, in their mid 40s.
Yeah.
And, and I've always been that type of person, a leader that doesn't impose by fear, but tries to be part of the team. So I had a great relationship, and it was very difficult for me being, I think at that time, 28, to deliver that message to somebody that had been there for 25 years. And I realized, okay, I need to wake up. I need to do something else for myself. And really not be that person at 45, 50 years old that gets delivered that message.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided to venture out into something completely different, which was the restaurant industry.
Yeah. And before we get to that, how did the whole real estate crash and ordeal, did that hit like your industry really hard back in like 07, 08, or was it already kind of on a steep decline before that?
Well, it was actually part of my life because obviously real estate, before that 2000, everybody here, especially in South Florida, was like, hey, let's buy a house. Let's leverage this. Let's utilize that. I was part of that, but I was also part of the 98% that had a tough time during that period. So it did affect me directly. And even within the business, obviously everything just was on a downcline.
Yeah, right. That was a tough time for everybody. I remember my parents too. They they had the idea of eventually moving out to New Mexico. Okay. Because they love, I guess the feel of New Mexico, which blows my mind. I mean, shout out to New Mexico.
No, for sure.
I went to high school there, bro. I went to military school in high school. Yeah, it's a different story for a different day.
I actually was there for nationals during college in Albuquerque.
Yeah, there we go. So the school I went to was in Roswell, bro. The alien town.
Okay.
Fucking shit town, right? Shout out to the people in Roswell, but I didn't like the town. Going from LA to Roswell, bro, is like...
Well, listen, I think we got the same thing in Iowa.
Yeah, same thing, bro.
But it's funny because Iowa was a great time, let me tell you.
Oh, I bet, bro. I bet. Cool. So, okay, you take the step out, and this is like 2010, 2011, you said, 10 years?
Yeah, so it was it was actually 2009.
2009.
When I had to really make decisions because I had gotten to a certain point within the corporate world that they told me, hey, listen, your position's going to end in 1 year. Yeah. So I got the little bit of
at least they told you.
Yeah, they told me. So I had 12 months to really figure out what I wanted to do. And that's when I had to make decisions. Yeah. We had gone through the hard times of the 2008. So it had to be something different.
Cool. And where did the whole hospitality business come in?
It's funny you ask because it really comes out of being hungry and being in college in the United States. So for me, having done high school in Mexico, the typical was like, all right, hey, listen, let's go have some fun, party, whatever. And 2, 3 in the mornings, you want some tacos, right? Yeah. After you had been drinking, having fun. And South Florida was not very prominent in Mexican food. So, of course, I don't consider myself a chef, but, I'll jump into a kitchen with anybody. Yeah. So I call myself like a cooking aficionado, right? Yeah. But it's all about calling family and saying, hey, how do you make this? How do you make that? And then it just started developing. So I did a lot of that through college. And, so what I started to do, and it was very interesting, is one day I came into the office with, a jar of salsa that I had made at home and just shared it over lunch with a coworker. And he tried it. He's like, wow, this is really good. Can you make me one? Yeah. And then that really just took off and it evolved. So during the time in the corporate world, I would literally take like little carts of jars of salsa and boxes and literally sell them. And then that evolved into like a catering business while I was still working, but out of my house. So that was, small scale, but I was busy on the weekends. And then I said, okay, like maybe we got something here. Yeah. But making that jump into like really signing a lease, having overhead was something that at that moment I was more cautious about, right? Yeah. So now when I received the message that I'm gonna, my job's gonna end in a year, I could have made the transition to another corporate job, but I was getting bored after being an athlete all my life, sitting behind a desk. Answering emails, answering phone calls. It's like, it got a little boring. So I was like, you know what? I need to do something different. Why don't we open up a restaurant? But let's do it cautiously and find something that's small. We'll develop the catering business. But I decided to do that all during that year in 2009, which everybody thought was absolutely crazy because we had just gone through the recession. I was like, what are you doing?
Everyone else is retracting.
Everybody's hiding. And I just wanted to do something different and do it for myself. So I exchanged my, my 10 by 10 office, so to speak, in the corporate world for a grind 24 hours a day. So it was interesting, but it paid off. It paid off.
And it's interesting because like from the outside, right? I don't know too much about the hospitality business and restaurant industry, but like one thing I've learned is like the margins are pretty thin, and unless you really take off, that's an industry where most people fail, and pretty miserably, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, if you make it to 2 years, like you're doing really great. And honestly, 4 out of 5 businesses fail. So I went in knowing that, but you got to believe in your product. You got to believe in what you're doing, and if you think you're going to fail, don't even start. So I had that mentality, and honestly, as I mentioned, I associate with both cultures, United States and Mexico. So I really want to take the roots and family cooked meals, but with the epitome of the American process. And what do I mean by that?
Like a fusion.
So because that's really who I am. I understand both and can associate. But at that moment, it was like the Chipotles of the world were at its peak. They had 1,500 stores nationwide, and they would ask me, "Oh, so what's your goal?" I was like, "To take Chipotle down," But for me, I literally sat at Chipotle for 6 weeks from dusk till dawn and just observed and learned. And that's really how I incorporated my business. So I had a very similar concept, but with authentic Mexican food, and I think that was one of the successes that took me to.
And all of us, again, here locally in
South Florida, Davie, Florida. That's where I started.
Yeah, cool, which isn't too far from here, right? And it's interesting because I mentioned that to like Bryan too, and other people like, man, like when I moved here, up until meeting you, the only other Mexican person I met was a girl who said hi to me at the beach. And she's like, "Oh, I follow you," right? She's like, "I'm the only Mexican here in South Florida," which cracked me up. But when I look around too, I don't see, I would tell my friend, I have a good friend of mine, Pablo. He's from Mexico City. He's a Chilango, right?
Chilango.
Yeah, pinche Chilango, right?
Exactly.
And he's a good friend of mine. But I'll tell him, I was like, bro, if you came here, right, and you open up like a fucking taqueria, like you would crush it, because I feel like that's a gaping hole here in South Florida, like authentic Mexican food from a Mexican that's from Mexico. You know what I mean?
No, for sure.
Did you kind of see that?
That's exactly what the goal was, and mine was really a taqueria. 15 different types of meats. Order tacos. I mean, you're from California, so to you it's every day, every block, bro. Every block, and good ones as well. So I've experienced that in California, and here that didn't exist. So that's where I said, okay, we have potential here for sure. Yeah.
Did it take off right away? Or?
So it was interesting. So I told you I wanted to start small. So I actually found a 500 square foot location. So, you being in real estate.
That's like from here to the board, bro.
Literally, like, 10 feet wide by 50, the smallest thing. And about 85% of it was kitchen. Because the reality is that I was going to start as a catering business. Decided to do takeout for fun. I had 50 square feet of customer space, one table.
Una mesita afuera.
And we would joke around because we would say that we would offer curbside seating. But so it started to take off. And what I did realize is that obviously first couple months were like get to know, keep going. But then there was a moment where I noticed that I needed to grow. And that was when I had a group of gentlemen that were all in suits, from the corporate world coming in for lunch. They opened up the door and they saw that there was no space. They literally turned around and left. And I was like, oh, that hurt. That hurt. So I needed to take out, I needed to grow. I needed to expand, do something. And there's a funny story behind it. So the restaurant's name was El Agave Azul, which is what tequila is made out of. But in reality, not a lot of people know what that is. So on the outside, as a sign, instead of that, what I did is I put tacos. So, general,
nobody can miss it.
Nobody can miss it. And that's actually what drew a lot of people to come even explore, and try it. But next door, there was a puppy store where a small store that just wasn't doing well, but they put puppies outside of their sign. So there was literally 6 inches in between our signs. So people would come in and say, "Is your name Taco Puppies?" And we would joke around with all that stuff. But eventually they moved out and I took over that space, and that's completely changed the game.
And then you added, right? You had your 500, you took over that spot too. What was the time frame from starting to taking over that?
I actually did that under a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So as soon as you acquired that spot, did it blow up, or what was that process?
Well, so I was obviously you're nervous, you know, you're
Yeah.
expanding. Will there be enough people? Because you have enough people to fulfill the small space, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to have enough to kind of fill up
That's
the
the
space?
risk now.
That's the risk. There's
But you
always
saw it as a
risk.
calculated risk.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely, because there was a following, there was already somebody there, and you know it was very cool. Besides the curbside seating, you realize that you needed to offer something else because people would actually bring picnic tables that are like camping type, and they would literally open them up
at your restaurant.
Yeah, on the sidewalk.
Wow.
So somebody brought a camping.
Bro, that's incredible.
It's
and this is all like pre-social media era too.
Yeah.
Now that shit would go viral, dude.
yes,
That's insane.
yeah, absolutely.
But that tells me that it's almost like you had like that cult fanaticism for your stuff because people are willing to overlook that stuff, bring their own picnic. Like, wow. Dude.
There was three things that I always joke around about. Curbside seating, right?
Yeah.
We had the one table, which was the VIP seating. And then the fact that people would turn around their trucks, you know, open up the bed and sit in order to be able to eat. And of course the picnic table. That was like the best.
That's incredible, bro. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you did all that within a year, which is incredible. Did you expand after that, or where did? Because I know before we started, you mentioned that you had gone to California too. So how did that play?
Yeah, so at over a period of 5 years, it became 4 locations here in South Florida.
Damn.
Yeah, so that first one, once we saw the expansion, you know, we were very fortunate enough to fill it up, and we had a constant.
By the way, real quick, why Davie? Is that like where you were staying?
So I lived in Weston. So Davie was a close location to where I was.
Cool.
Nova Southeastern was so it was known territory for me.
Okay.
And I think for me, one of the key points was that the location, even though it was very small, the overhead was very calculated risks.
Okay.
To me, that was the determining
sense.
point. Honestly, the plaza's still there. You know, it's not the best, but it was the little engine that could, for sure.
Were all the locations in Broward? Did you have any in Miami-Dade?
So we had one in Miami-Dade, so Doral, two in Davie. I put another one closer to Nova Southeastern, trying to capture the college crowd.
Perfect.
And then the flagship store, which we built from the ground, was Fort Lauderdale. So you know, different crowd in each location. So it was
amazing,
very
bro.
cool.
Congratulations, man. That's amazing.
It was
exciting. How old were you
time.
at the time again when you were doing that?
So at that time, I was about 34 when I started.
Okay, cool.
Dope,
bro. Hell yeah.
Exactly.
So where does Cali play in?
So, well, there's a lot to the story, and
we're ready.
Yeah,
we're ready. It's been juicy so far.
So we progressed, from one location. Nova Southeastern was number 2, and then the opportunity to grow to Fort Lauderdale was option number 3. And then opportunities fall into your lap, which sometimes you're like, no, absolutely, I would not do that. But the Doral opportunity fell as I was building Fort Lauderdale.
Wow.
And I'm the kind of guy that says, yes, I'll figure it out later. And I decided to open up 2 restaurants at the same time. One of the craziest things I've ever done in my life.
So you shoot first, ask questions later, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So by 2015, 2016, the 4 locations. So as you know, here in the United States, Cinco de Mayo is like the epitome for Mexican restaurants, right? And I will say throwing one Cinco de Mayo party is like a big deal. Is that big
in South Florida too?
Oh yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
It is big.
Cool.
It is big. And but throwing 4 parties at the same time in 4 different locations, that was interesting.
Bro,
so talk about operations.
That's legendary, bro. That's amazing.
But it was fun. I really enjoyed that. And from that, there was we took off. We were at the South Beach Food and Wine Festival. There was taco competition in Fort Lauderdale. So there's a lot of activities that we did. NBC6, Bites with Belky. So we had the accolades. We had all the stuff. And there was always a word that I used with much caution, which was franchising, right? Because obviously at the end of the day, that was the goal. As I told you, for me, Chipotle was kind of like my mentor, is how I wanted to grow. And but
from a business standpoint,
business standpoint.
Because I look at it like, from what I've seen, especially in California growing up, is, man, so many places like yours would start. And then when they would franchise, I was like, man, it's like they lost the quality. So somewhere it got lost in translation. Was that ever a fear of yours?
Well, actually, I went through it because from 1 location to 2, there was absolutely 2 different things that were going on and quality control for me. So I'm a computer science major, so I'm a very 1 + 1 = 2 kind of guy. So process is super important for me. And I think that was the base of the success. So quality control was very important because you didn't want to grow and say, oh, no, that place is better than the other. I wanted for you to say, I'm going to go to any of the 4 and it's the exact same thing.
Experience.
Same experience. Absolutely. So that was a challenge. but you fight through it, and the end result was a central kitchen and kind of like be able to distribute. So now then you turn into like a logistics company because now you have 4 locations, and that complexity was way funner than being in the corporate world.
I bet.
Because you're
this is your baby
problems
that you created. So to see it develop like that, I'm sure made you proud too.
And it was very different because obviously you can buy a franchise and they'll tell you, here is 1 + 1. Here's the menu, do this, do that, and you'll No, we built it from scratch. Like it was our ideas. It was, and really what the way that to this day, I tell people that I created the menu was really bringing back memories of my childhood and growing up, being in high school in Mexico, those tacos that you went to skip class,
that you were looking forward to. Right. You woke up thinking about it.
Or, the soup that you had on the 31st at your aunt's house, or the meat that you ate at your grandparents. And that's really, it was recreation of memories. So
this is like a passion project for you too.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's what made it even more fun, that you got to be passionate about. And people would ask me, so why don't you offer this type of Mexican food? And the answer is that because I don't like it. And if I can't be passionate about it, how am I going to offer you something that You're
not just doing this for the money.
No,
this is coming from the soul.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was just really sharing my culture. That's how it started. And it just became a passion and it became a business. So it was exciting. Bro. Yeah. So then if we progress after 2016, I told you one of my first passions was soccer, right? So, played a little professional college.
What position, by the way?
So I played left back. I was a frustrated forward. So I played left back, but we had a great run at Nova Southeast University. Made a lot of friends. I think the little ball has given me everything in life: opportunities, friendships, shown me leadership, teamwork, anything you can. That's I think all sports teach you that.
Yeah, it builds character for sure. I did the same thing with basketball, and I played professionally as well, and I can attest so much of my character and what I bring to the table today. Or I can even attribute a lot of my success in the entrepreneurial world in real estate because of it, because what it built, getting the coaching, dealing with competition, understanding that you have to work your ass off, putting passion behind it, putting it first. Like I remember not going to parties or doing things because I wanted to pursue my career. So totally, I can relate.
Yeah, no, it definitely shows you a lot. So of course, during this time, my son, same thing. As soon as he was able to walk, he started playing. And at the same time, while I was running my business, I was coaching, and he continued to develop. So by the time that he ended up being 16, which was in 2017, he told me, "Hey, listen, I'm ready." And I said, "Ready for what?" He's like, "I'm ready to explore professional opportunities." So I was like, "Okay, cool." So we decided to take a trip down to Mexico and just try out in various teams. And he ended up signing a contract with the team that I've been a fan of for all my life, Tigres.
What a dream come true.
Tigres. So it was a dream come true, and I supported him. He went out there. He was there for 1.5 years. And within all these stories, and I think that's one of the messages that I've now understood that I need to share is that yes, that progress that we talked about sounds great, but there's difficulties along the way. There's things that happen. I actually suffered a personal tragedy, and that's kind of what changed my life over the last 5 years. I talk about it. I got to be open about it. My son was doing great, but he ended up getting very sick in rare disease. 120 days later, he passed away.
Really?
Yes. So I had to make some, decisions that drew me away from the hospitality industry. So as you can imagine, for me, it's been it was a great run. Had to deal with that tragedy that obviously, from personal standpoint, family standpoint, we had to deal with, and then begin to rebuild. So that's what has been the last 5 years, and that's been a whole nother story to
wow, man, I'm sorry to hear that, man. Wow, I had no idea. That must have been heavy, dude.
Yes, absolutely. So you're at the peak of your career, you're developing,
everything
you're stepping,
is firing on all
everything's
cylinders.
fire. So not only the passion of him playing, but the business is at its point. And then life can hit you hard. Life can hit you pretty hard.
It does, man. It does. So you go through the recovery process of that. So what was the first thing that was done after you kind of got back to ground zero? Yeah,
so ground zero was, it took some time, obviously, because from a mental standpoint you had to do, but you said, okay, well, you need to stabilize. What's the first thing? Well, corporate world was, near and dear. I knew how that go. But after being out of the game for about 12 years, it was like hard to get back into it, right? So it's been about 3 years where I said, okay, let me just stabilize there. But then your mind comes comes back, right? Because obviously after suffering something like that, you realize, all right, well, we need to keep going. Life doesn't stop.
Yep.
You know, everybody else around you needs you, and we gotta do it all over again.
Yep.
The cool thing is that you've done it once.
Yeah.
You can do it again. Now you realize that, you know, at a different stage in your life, you rebuild, you have a different mentality. So I initially went back into the corporate world just to kind of stabilize, because I did have to make financial decisions and had to separate myself from the hospitality industry. And then you know, you begin to network again, and then you come back, and that was the initial step. And then the hospitality just calls you back again after being absent, because you know, you was part of it. People know you. So that's what we're working on now. The hospitality, coming back into the restaurant industry, partnering up with the right people. But you have a completely different perspective, because you're right. Margins are small. You know, it is a tough industry. You work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And for a while, when you're in the corporate world, you're like, wow, you realize that you have weekends. Like, how does that work? You know, what is that for?
It's new.
It's new. But that's the time that you really focus on what are the other projects. And now I feel that I'm a different person. Number one, because of everything that I went through, but I'm able to realize that, okay, we got to work a lot smarter, not harder, and be able to focus on different lines of business that, you know, produce different types of incomes as well. So yeah, I think the expansion has now been more broad, because before it was like, all right, the restaurants, because they demanded that, right? Yeah, of course. So now the different focuses is what's even more exciting now.
Yeah. So in the corporate world, again, ground zero, 3 years in the corporate world?
Yeah.
What did you go back to? Telecommunications?
Telecommunications, yeah. Cool. So that was the first step, telecommunications. But then you realize, okay, well, what else? Like, there's so much time. Well, there's so much time left over, because I was used to working 24 hours a day. Right. You know, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean.
I mean, not really.
Not really,
you really
but you actually had to dream about
when you want to sleep, you're thinking about it.
Exactly, for sure. So you understand me. But then you're like, all right, well, what's the next step? You know, what is the other business opportunity? And then you start. I think for me, the restaurant was my on the street MBA, so to speak, which at the end of the day showed me a lot of things that my initial college degree didn't do it for me.
Two different worlds. That's
two different worlds. Absolutely.
You know? Real world experience, real world business experience, right? Getting beat up, having success, having failures. To me, that's irreplaceable. It's the same thing like when I have salespeople or I bring people on to work with me, I make them come up through the school of hard knocks. I make them go out there and knock doors and make calls, because that's the real world experience and skills that you can't replicate in a classroom.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And for me, that restaurant experience, talking to people, sharing ideas, dealing with customers, it really kind of opened up, because I used to be a lot more quiet than who I am today. But that when you're thrown into the fire, as you say, hard knocks, like you either got to do it or do it. That's
You're forced in the fire. You come out a different
person.
I'm a 100% different person now after having done real estate and put in the work that I did. Compared to before, bro. I remember my first year, I broke down in tears 3 times because I was like, can I do this shit? This is hard. Like, how come I'm not doing better? And, you know, you deal with your own personal demons, but you come out of that like a fucking Spartan. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
It's funny you say that, because, you know, I went into sales right after, you know, everything that happened. And the first 6 months were really, really tough. And then you realize, all right, well, you have to adjust your niche. You have to adjust your personality. You have to change what you're saying. And then you start seeing success. And obviously that motivates you to keep going, right?
Absolutely, man. So there was a lot there, bro. Wow. Fuck, man.
I dropped it.
It was heavy, dude. So, you know, you brought up the future, the adjustments, like, you know, real estate investments. What's your mind on now? What's the focus?
The focus right now is obviously having different streams. Realize that you have to have you have to be involved in anything and working smarter. Really setting up the foundation in order to have that success along the way. Realize that immediate gratification is not something that's going to happen to you. I'm focused on really setting the foundations. Like I told you, hospitality is something that is always going to be there. But I see it from a different perspective. Maybe from a more of a background, not necessarily being the front of the face of the brand, like I used to be before. You know, it's the organization is really important. And then obviously, like I said, other opportunities that rise, like importation of goods, things like that. So, but still related with food, funny enough.
Of course.
You know, so that's been a focus, and that's really been like talking to people, networking, you know, letting them know who you are, what you've done. And then when that happens, you know, things begin to click and things things begin to happen.
Yeah.
So that's one. And then obviously I met you, I met Bryan, and it's funny because things have beginning to fall into place, and I met other people that have also had the opportunity in similar situations, difficulties, and they're like, listen, why don't we do this, but let's do it together. As a team, we can do it. And then, you're fully involved in real estate, and everything that you've said so far is like, I'm listening because
and you met David as well,
and
right?
David,
Who's his
of
own
course.
developer.
Yeah. So, and I met other people that are involved in construction, and then you start putting all the pieces of the puzzles together, and you're like, okay, well, it's right here.
Yep.
All you got to do is begin to execute it, understand it, dive into it, and really grasp it. But the opportunity is there. Yeah. And the last thing that I'm scared of is working. So like, let's go do it.
Yeah.
So that's really what I've been trying to focus on as well.
Yeah. So you brought up too that you were a coach.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Strictly soccer, or did you coach anything else?
Strictly soccer.
Yeah.
But obviously I do have a story, and I think that as my development continues to progress, one of the goals from a coaching perspective and just talking to people, I don't want to say that I can coach on what I've gone through, but just share my story. And listen, if you have difficulties and you've been knocked to the floor once, you can do it again. Absolutely.
So are you like the coaches I had that you rule with an iron fist and you get on us, especially if someone's good and you want to extract every drop of potential, or are you more
the coaching perspective, especially in sports? There's probably a lot of guys out there that are now 25, 28 years old that I coached that will probably tell you that I was a tough coach. But it's cool because as I and the other thing that I'm focusing on is really trying to get in shape and back into more of a playing category than just showing up, right? You start playing against those guys that are 28, 30 years old, or 25, and you're like, coach, what are you doing here? I'm like, hey, I'm here to compete with you. But it's really cool to meet them after 10 years later, and then they come to you and say, hey, thanks, coach, for being a hard ass. Because it makes it made a difference. It made a difference for sure.
I would always ask my coaches, like, man, I feel like you go harder on me than anybody else. But he's like, I want to pull the greatness out of you, right? Like I see something in you. You dedicate yourself, and I know this is you'll thank me later is basically what they would tell me. But in the moment, you're a kid, you're like, fuck this guy. You know what I mean? This is bullshit. Like, I have to run extra. I have to stay after and shoot free throws. These guys get to go home.
So the size of a soccer field.
Yeah.
So think about one of the things that to this day, most guys hate me for it, right? Corner to corner. Yeah. You literally sprint from one corner to corner and jog the side. Yeah. Corner to corner. But you did that for a while, and everybody hated you for it. Yeah. But 10 years later, like, thanks, coach.
And they come game time. It's easy, right? And that's what I would always remember. I'm like, the game is easy because they bust our ass in practice. Yeah. Like you have to, because when you look at the totality, especially in basketball, unless you're in the NBA and you play like 100 games, right, 80, 90% of the game time is practice, and 5 to 10% is the game, right? But then I look at even how I conduct myself in my business and how I train people now, like on the coaching side in business, it's the same thing. What we show when it's game time is what we did behind closed doors and nobody was watching, right? So if we refine your skill set, doing a presentation to a homeowner on the real estate side, and we've drilled that thing 1,000 times, by the time you sit with somebody, it's a master crafted fucking presentation and that people are just like, wow, and natural. But how do we get to that point? You ain't just going to show up, taking the crust out of your eyes and doing a presentation. We've drilled it for hours and hours and hours. Repetition. But like we were talking about, that's what the whole, that breeding that we got and cultivating through sports, it taught us that. And we had the passion behind it too.
Completely.
You know what I mean?
Completely.
So I'm bringing that up because I recommend, even if people didn't play sports as a kid, as an adult now, to get into boxing or get into something to activate that competitive juice. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think it makes a huge difference. And you don't have to have played a sport, but I think you can incorporate that into your life now, as you said, whether you get into boxing, and it comes down to discipline, right? To discipline, being organized, having a defined schedule of activities that you're going to do, and keeping to it. Keep into it for sure.
Cool, man. So I really enjoyed this episode, my friend. We're definitely going to do another one, bro. Because
I can't wait.
You can give us some more stories, bro. Because it's cool, bro, to hear it. Because like whenever I hear about somebody who, like, even just with what you said with like the restaurant business or even your journey through the corporate world, it's cool to see somebody take an idea, conceive it, and then see it into fruition. Because most people, I think, have those ideas, but they won't see it through like you did, right?
It is something that is challenging, but the follow through is super important, especially if you believe in your idea, which you have to, and seeing that follow through, I think, is what takes it from an idea to something that can be conceived and done.
And I'm sure at the end of the day, you're super proud about that.
Oh, absolutely. Who wouldn't be? You know, for sure.
Cool.
For sure.
If somebody wants to reach out to you, Ivan, and they want to talk to you, like, do you have Instagram? Do you
Yeah,
have any
absolutely. So we'll put the information on Instagram. So, but yes, Instagram and, you know, information. I'm open 24 hours a day. I'm that type of guy. So it doesn't matter. But for sure, we'll give you the information so you can set it up.
I might have an aspiring, you know, restaurant owner here who's going to be like, I got to pick this guy's brain. You know?
Oh, absolutely. And I love to share, you know, because, you know, if you've never been into the restaurant industry, I've met some people that want to get into it, and I just want to make sure, hey, think about this, because at the beginning I didn't know anything, and you think about those first moments, and you're like, what was I doing? But it's much better if you have that advance already.
Absolutely, bro. Cool. Appreciate you being here, man.
Yeah, right, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
See you guys on the next episode. Peace.